Every time I organize a space in my home, I feel an inexplicable sense of peace wash over me. It's not just about seeing everything in its place, it's about feeling like I can finally breathe. But it hasn't always been like this. Do you remember the last time you opened a closet and were buried under things you didn't even remember you had? Or when you realized you spent more time organizing stuff than actually living your life? That's exactly how I felt when I realized my home had become a storage unit for memories, objects, and responsibilities that suffocated me day after day. The drawers overflowed, the closets barely closed, and every surface became a territory for some purposeless item. The worst part? My mind was as cluttered as my spaces. Today I want to share how I transformed not just my home, but my entire life, by discovering that true organization doesn't come from perfectionism, but from the intention and meaning we give to everything around us. I realized that to change a space, we first have to change our relationship with it. This journey began when I learned about the principles of Japanese minimalism, not as a decorating style, but as a more conscious way of living. The transformation began when I understood that my home wasn't just a place to store things, but a direct reflection of my mental state. The more I accumulated, the heavier I felt. When I finally took the first step towards simplifying, something unexpected happened. I didn't miss anything I had let go. On the contrary, I discovered a new kind of wealth, the abundance that comes from empty spaces, silence, and clarity. So let's embark on this journey together to transform our spaces through Japanese minimalism. Not as a strict rule, but as a gentle path to create a home that truly nurtures your essence and frees your energy for what really matters in life. It all started on a Sunday morning. I woke up exhausted even after 8 hours of sleep. I looked around, and my room, which should have been a sanctuary, was actually a minefield of clothes, books, beauty products, and 1,000 other things that no longer fit in the closets. That's when I realized it wasn't work or responsibilities draining me. It was the invisible weight of disorder around me. That very day, determined to change, I grabbed an empty cardboard box and started with the simplest task, my nightstand. I found receipts from 2 years ago, expired medications, 6 different chargers, and dozens of small items that made no sense being there. In just 15 minutes, my nightstand was clean for the first time in years. And there, in that little organized corner, I felt a mental clarity I hadn't experienced in a long time. This small success gave me the courage to keep going. The next day, I faced the bathroom cabinet, then the sock drawer. Within a week, I had created small pockets of order in every room, and I noticed something fascinating. These organized spaces became anchors of tranquility. On difficult days, I found myself gravitating towards those corners of simplicity I had created. The real shift came when I realized that Japanese minimalism wasn't about throwing everything away and living with the bare minimum. It was about questioning each item. Does this bring me joy? Does this serve a real purpose in my current life? I began to understand that every object in our home occupies not just physical space, but also mental space. And the more purposeless things we accumulate, the more fragmented our attention becomes. My kitchen was the biggest challenge. I opened the cabinets and found utensils I had never used, gadgets I had bought on impulse, and dishware stored for special occasions that never came. I decided to be honest with myself. If I hadn't used it in the last 6 months, I probably wouldn't use it in the next 6 either. 3 boxes later, my kitchen contained only the essentials, and surprisingly, cooking became easier and more intuitive. Without jammed drawers and without searching for tools in the midst of clutter, every move flowed naturally. The closet was another revelation. I looked at the dozens of clothing items and realized that I only wore the same 10 or 15. The rest was just taking up space, giving me a false sense of abundance, when in reality it only created indecision every morning. I separated what I truly wore, what I loved to put on, and donated the rest. For the first time, I opened my closet and all I saw were possibilities that pleased me, not obligations or reminders of money poorly spent. More than just organizing physical spaces, I began to apply the same principles to my daily routine. I noticed how much time I wasted on activities that brought me neither joy nor purpose. I started creating intentional pauses in my day, 5 minutes of silence in the morning, a short walk at lunch without looking at my phone, a moment to truly savor my afternoon tea. Japanese minimalism taught me that a well-organized space starts with a controlled intake of new items. Before each purchase, I began to ask myself, will this improve my life, or will it just take up space in it? This simple question drastically reduced what came into my home, and to my surprise, the less I bought, the more satisfied I felt with what I already had. I learned to value quality over quantity, a good kitchen tool that lasts for decades, a well-made piece of clothing that doesn't wear out after a few washes, a piece of furniture that ages gracefully. This mindset not only reduced clutter, but also connected me more deeply with the items I chose to keep, each one with a purpose, each one truly appreciated. Organizing my cabinets gained a new dimension when I learned to fold clothes vertically. Not only did it save space, but it also allowed me to see everything at a glance. Nothing was forgotten at the back of the drawers. I applied the same principle to the pantry shelves, everything visible, nothing hidden or forgotten until it's spoiled. One of the most liberating aspects was saying goodbye to perfection. The order I was striving for wasn't that of a magazine-ready home, impeccable and untouched. It was a practical, lived-in order that served me in my daily life. An order that gave me more time, not one that required more time to maintain. I began to notice how natural light flowed differently through the more spacious rooms, how the air felt fresher, how each object stood out and gained importance when it wasn't competing with dozens of others. My home started to breathe, and I along with it. The process of letting go brought to light emotions I didn't expect, objects I had kept out of guilt, obligation, or fear of a future with scarcity. Each decision to let something go was also a decision to trust myself more, to trust the present, and to trust life. I no longer needed so many material anchors to feel secure. The empty spaces that emerged didn't call out to be filled. On the contrary, they became places of possibility, creativity, and breathing room. I realized I had spent years trying to fill every inch of my home, when what I really needed was space. Space to think, to feel, to be. In the following weeks, I noticed subtle but profound changes. I was sleeping better. I woke up with more clarity. I found things easily, without that daily frustration of searching for keys, documents, or anything that had been swallowed by the clutter. The time I used to spend organizing and reorganizing the mess was now invested in activities that truly nourished me, reading, cooking at a leisurely pace, and having unhurried conversations. One practice that transformed my relationship with my home was creating a daily 5-minute ritual to put everything in its place before bed. A clean table, neatly arranged cushions, clothes hung up. This small act became a closing ritual for the day, a way to honor the space that shelters me and prepare for a more peaceful morning. Another transformative habit was the one in, one out rule. For every new item I brought into the house, another had to go. This made me much more mindful about what I allowed to enter my space. The question shifted from, can I buy this, to, am I willing to create space for this? Clear surfaces became a new luxury in my home. Tables, countertops, and dressers no longer served as temporary storage that became permanent. Keeping them clear wasn't just an aesthetic decision, but a functional one. It created space for activities, creativity, and possibilities. Every room gained a clear purpose. The bedroom returned to being a sanctuary for rest, not an impromptu office or an extension of the wardrobe. The living room became a gathering space, not a storage area for misplaced items. The kitchen, a place of nourishment and creativity, not a battlefield against disorder. Even with all these advancements, there were still tough days. Days when organization felt impossible, when the energy was lacking, and when old habits wanted to creep back in. During those times, I didn't punish myself. I simply went back to the basics, choosing a small space and organizing. A drawer, a shelf, a surface. The feeling of control returned, one step at a time. Over time, this new relationship with my home began to influence my external relationships. I became more selective with my commitments, more present at the gatherings that truly mattered, and clearer about my boundaries. Just as I had learned to say no to unnecessary items, I learned to say no to demands that didn't fit into the life I was building. Japanese minimalism taught me that our homes should be like well-tended gardens, with space for growth, but also with clear limits and intention in every element. A garden is not just about what we plant in it, but also about the space we leave between the plants, allowing each one to bloom fully. I realized that much of the clutter stemmed from a scarcity mindset, holding on out of fear of needing something and not having it. The antidote was cultivating a mindset of sufficiency, recognizing what was already enough, what already served me fully. This subtle shift in perspective drastically diminished the impulse to acquire more. One of the spaces that benefited the most from this transformation was my home office. Once a chaos of papers, books, and materials, it became an environment that truly supported my thinking and creativity. I found that my mind worked better with fewer visual distractions, with more room for ideas to breathe. The living room, which was once dominated by the television and multiple electronic devices, gained a new focus, space for conversation, for reading, for simply being. Technology still had its place, but it was no longer the centerpiece of the environment. In the bathroom, I reduced the number of products to just those I actually used, and that made a difference. The simplicity of this space created an environment more akin to a spa, calm, organized, inviting. The morning self-care ritual became more mindful, less overwhelming. The entryway of the house gained a defined purpose, a place for transitioning between the outside world and the refuge of home. A small bench for removing shoes, hooks for coats and bags, a small tray for keys and essentials. This intentional organization made departures less stressful and arrivals more welcoming. What surprised me most was how these physical changes affected my emotional well-being. Bad days still happened, of course, but the organized home no longer amplified those difficult moments. On the contrary, it offered a counterbalance, a silent reminder that not everything was out of control. There was a safe harbor, a space I had consciously created that embraced me. I learned that maintaining this order was not an added chore on my list, but a practice of self-care. Each small act of organization, returning a book to the shelf, washing the dishes after using them, putting away clean clothes right away, was a form of respect for myself, for my future self, who would appreciate this small effort. One of the biggest revelations was realizing how much of my consumption was driven not by necessity, but by unprocessed emotions. Shopping out of boredom, sadness, stress. By creating a home that nourished me emotionally, many of these impulses diminished. I no longer needed new things to feel better. The home itself had become a source of well-being. With fewer things to manage, I found time to cultivate new habits. I started preparing meals more mindfully, sleeping better, and maintaining a more consistent exercise routine. It wasn't just about having less. It was about creating space for what truly nurtured my life. Keeping the house clean became much simpler. With surfaces free of clutter and cabinets no longer overflowing, the time needed to keep everything in order decreased dramatically. This efficiency created more free time, the true luxury in modern life. An important aspect of this journey was learning to define what enough meant for me. It wasn't about reducing to the bare minimum, but about finding my personal balance. The point where I had everything I needed and nothing more. This point is different for each person, each family, each home. There isn't a one-size-fits-all formula. I developed a more discerning eye for the quality of my surroundings, a cup carefully crafted by an artisan, a natural wool blanket that would last for decades, a plant that brought life to the space. The quantity decreased, but the appreciation increased. Each object gained its own voice, its own space to be truly seen and valued. The seasons took on new significance in this simpler home. The onset of winter called for cozier blankets and candles for the long nights. Summer invited the shedding of layers, creating even more open spaces. The house breathed with the seasons, adapting without accumulating. Visitors began to notice the difference. They didn't specifically comment on the organization, but they said they felt good in my home, that it was a calm, welcoming space. I realized that the house had become a more authentic reflection of who I was, not a disconnected accumulation of things I once thought I wanted to be. A practice that proved especially helpful was the habit of regularly revisiting what I had decided to keep. Every 3 months I would look at my belongings with fresh eyes. Items that I had hesitated to donate during the first round now seemed clearly unnecessary. Letting go became a muscle that grew stronger with use. Japanese minimalism taught me to find beauty in the spaces in between, the gaps between objects, the silence between sounds, the pauses between activities. I learned that these empty spaces were not truly empty but full of potential, breath, and possibility. Little by little, I stopped viewing objects as mere possessions and began to see them as responsibilities. Each item in my home required something from me, space, maintenance, attention, energy. This perspective made it much easier to be selective about what I allowed into my life. I realized that many of the objects I kept were, in fact, materialized versions of fears and insecurities. Clothes from when I was thinner, fear of never feeling beautiful again, broken items that I would one day fix, fear of waste, gifts that I didn't like, fear of disappointing the giver. Acknowledging these fears was the first step in freeing myself from them. I created small rituals to facilitate letting go. I would take photos of sentimental items before donating them, preserving the memory without keeping the object. I would thank things for their service before letting them go. As simple as they may seem, these gestures honored the emotional connection and made the process more meaningful. The concept of preventive tidying became part of my routine, intervening before chaos set in. 5 minutes a day to put everything back in its place. A moment each week to review a small area. This constant and gentle maintenance prevented the need for exhausting major reorganizations. I understand that true organization is not static, but fluid, like life itself. Needs change, seasons pass, new circumstances arise. A system that is too rigid would break under that pressure. I learned to create flexible structures that could evolve organically over time. The greatest gift of this journey was rediscovering silence. Not just the absence of noise, but visual silence. Spaces that didn't scream for attention, that allowed my thoughts to settle, that invited contemplation. In that silence, I found parts of myself that had been drowned out by the constant noise of excess. As the months passed, transformation ceased to be a project and became simply a way of life. Organization was no longer something I did, but something I lived. The principles of Japanese minimalism, intention, attention, valuing the essential, became natural filters for making big and small decisions. Today, when I come home after a tough day, I immediately feel the difference. The space welcomes me, calms me, brings me back to myself. I no longer need to escape to hotels or spas in search of tranquility. I have created my own sanctuary, a place that nourishes rather than drains, that simplifies rather than complicates. This journey has taught me that our relationship with space and objects is, at its core, an expression of our relationship with ourselves. Every decision to keep or let go of an item is also a decision about the kind of life we want to create, about what we truly value, about how we choose to invest our limited energy. And perhaps the most valuable lesson has been this: true Japanese minimalism is not about having less, but about making space for more tranquility, more clarity, more purpose, more life. It's about removing distractions to reveal what really matters. And in this process of subtraction, we discover a richness that no accumulation could ever provide. So, when you look at that overflowing drawer or that closet that barely closes, remember, every little act of organization is also an act of self-care. Every decision to simplify is a choice for more freedom. And the home you create day by day is not just a physical space, but a reflection of the life you are choosing to live. Japanese minimalism reminds us that our home should be the place where we feel most like ourselves, most present, most alive. A space that supports our dreams rather than competes with them. A sanctuary from which we don't need to escape, but to which we long to return. And this transformation begins not with grand gestures, but with small daily choices. The decision to bring more awareness, more intention, and more gratitude to every corner of our existence. Share this blessed video so that it can touch and help others like you and me. Don't forget to click the subscribe button if you haven't already. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being part of our faith community. If you would like to support our channel a little more, consider becoming a member of our channel. I'll leave 2 more videos here for you to continue your journey. Thank you, and may God bless you all. See you next time.